The CEO found a letter hidden in his late wife's book. It led him to a poor single mom who changed everything. The apartment was quiet, the kind of silence that crept into the corners and made itself at home. Miles Brennan stood at the threshold of the room that had remained untouched for nearly 5 years. Dust lay thinly on the bookshelves, undisturbed, just as Rachel had left them. Her favorite mug still sat on the windowsill, cracked from a forgotten fall, yet never thrown away. He did not come in here often, but tonight, something had pulled him in. It had started with a storm outside, rain tapping against the windows like knuckles gently knocking on memory. Miles had poured himself a glass of scotch, then stood staring at the room for longer than he intended. And now, here he was, walking in with the hesitant steps of someone trespassing in a sacred place. He ran his fingers along the spines of the books, most of them well worn, all of them hers. Rachel had loved fiction, especially the kind where people were broken, lost, and somehow found again. She said it reminded her that healing was never too far away. He pulled out The Paper Garden, a novel she had read twice during her final weeks. The pages still smelled faintly of her lavender lotion. And then, it happened. As he opened the book, a small folded piece of paper fell to the floor. He frowned, crouched down, and picked it up. The edges were yellowed, the creases soft from time. Miles unfolded it slowly, feeling the weight of something he could not yet name. The handwriting was unmistakable, Rachel's. Gentle, slightly slanted, with the loops on her lowercase e, always a little too big. If you find this, it means I did not get the chance to tell you, and I am sorry for that. There was a woman. Her name is Elena Brooks. She saved me, though no one knows. I never got to thank her. I hope she is still kind, still standing tall somewhere in this world. Please find her, if only to tell her she mattered. The paper trembled in his hand. Miles sank slowly into the armchair by the window, the one Rachel used to curl up in with a blanket and a book. The letter rested on his lap, and his hand hung loosely by his side, fingers curled slightly, as if trying to grasp what was no longer there. Elena Brooks. He whispered the name like it belonged to someone from a dream. He had never heard of her. Rachel had never mentioned anyone by that name. How had this woman saved her? When? And why had she hidden this from him? He read the letter again and again. Something inside him shifted, quietly, but undeniably. The weight of 5 years of silence, of grief pressed down by routine, of surviving but never truly living, cracked just a little. There were questions now. Not just about Rachel's final days, but about this woman she had once called a savior. Why had she written this letter and never sent it? Why had she tucked it away in a book instead of giving it to him directly? He looked up, eyes sweeping the shelves, then settling on the rain-slicked window. The city lights blinked in the distance. The office building he once lived for now seemed further away than ever. Miles stood, slowly, purposefully. He placed the letter carefully back into the book, then tucked it under his arm. He did not return to the living room, did not pour another drink. Instead, he went to his study, sat at his desk, and opened his laptop. He typed in the name, Elena Brooks. A search. A new beginning. Within minutes, he had found fragments, an old nursing license, a hospital record, a reference to a small-town health clinic several years ago. He leaned back in his chair. It was not much, but it was enough. Miles picked up his phone, turned it over in his palm, then set it down. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, he would leave. Not to chase ghosts, but to find the woman who once saved the love of his life, and, perhaps without knowing it, had just saved him too. The road into Briar Hill was narrow and uneven, flanked by overgrown fields and sleepy houses that looked as though they had stopped aging decades ago. The town had one gas station, one grocery store, and a main street that ended before it truly began. It was quiet, but not lifeless, a place people lived in, not passed through. Miles parked his rental car in front of a modest white house with faded blue shutters. A crooked mailbox leaned forward at the curb, and a child's pink tricycle sat tipped over near the front steps. The yard was neat, though the grass needed trimming. A set of wind chimes dangled above the porch, singing softly in the breeze. He double-checked the name and address on the paper in his hand. Elena Brooks. Taking a breath, he walked to the door and knocked. The woman who opened it was younger than he expected, late 20s. Her blonde hair was tied back in a loose bun, a few strands clinging to her face from the heat. She wore scrubs and sneakers that had seen better days. Behind her, in the dim hallway, a small voice echoed, "Mommy, where's Bunny?" "I'll find her in a minute," Elena replied over her shoulder before turning her gaze fully to Miles. Her expression shifted the moment he introduced himself. "My name is Miles Brennan. I think you knew my wife, Rachel." Elena's eyes narrowed. Her grip on the door tightened. Whatever openness had been there a second ago vanished. "I don't do interviews, and I don't want to talk about her. I'm not a reporter," he said quickly. "I just found a letter. From her. She wrote your name. She said you saved her." Elena's jaw tensed. "I didn't save her," she said quietly, firmly, "and I don't need your thanks." "I'm not here just to say thank you," Miles said, stepping slightly closer. "I just want to understand." She shook her head once. "She's gone. Whatever you're looking for, it won't come from me." Before he could say more, she started to close the door. Miles caught a glimpse of the inside, a small living room with crayon drawings on the fridge, a couch with a knitted blanket, and a pink backpack resting by the stairs. "Elena," he said, more gently this time, "I think she meant for me to find you." The door paused, just for a breath. Then it closed the rest of the way with a soft but final click. Miles stood there for a moment longer, listening, thinking. He stepped back from the porch, glancing at the mailbox again. The name Brooks had been painted on it in faded gold. Next to it, in crooked pink letters, a child had written, "Maisie." He drove to the edge of town, checked into the only inn he could find, and sat on the edge of the bed with Rachel's book in his lap. The letter was still tucked inside. She had written a name. Not just any name. A woman who had, in some unspoken way, been there when he had not. Who had been important enough for Rachel to remember in her final days. And now she was shutting him out. But Miles had spent his whole life finding answers to things no one else could. He had built companies by seeing patterns others missed. And now, something in Elena's face, not just the sadness, but the fire underneath it, told him there was more to the story. He looked out the window toward the quiet town, the streetlights flickering on one by one. He was not leaving, not yet. The next time Miles saw Elena, she was standing outside the preschool, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose knot, her arms crossed over her chest as she waited. Maisie came running out the door in a blur of pink dress, pink backpack, pink headband. She held a drawing in one hand and a banged-up bunny in the other. Miles had not planned to walk past. But seeing them, he could not help slowing his steps. Elena noticed him. Her posture stiffened slightly, but she did not turn away. Instead, she gave a small, silent nod. It was more than she had offered before. "I am not here to reopen anything," Miles said as he stopped a few feet away. Elena looked at her daughter, then back at him. "You are doing it anyway," she replied quietly. Maisie tugged on her mother's shirt and pointed at Miles. "Is he the sad man who came to the house?" Elena gave her a gentle nudge toward the car. "Come on, Maisie." They left without another word, but Elena had not slammed the door in his face this time. That, in itself, felt like a beginning. Miles had found a small rental unit just a few blocks away from Elena's place. He told himself it was for convenience. He told himself he would only stay a few more days. He kept telling himself these things, even as he kept finding reasons not to leave. One afternoon, he walked to the nearby park and spotted Maisie playing alone by the swings. Her pink dress fluttered in the wind as she tried to push herself higher but barely moved. Then she tripped over her own shoelace. She did not cry, just sat there looking at her scuffed knee. Miles approached slowly. "May I help you?" Maisie looked up, nodded once. He knelt down, untangled the knot in her laces, then pulled out a clean tissue from his pocket and gently wiped the dirt off her hands. She watched him quietly, then whispered, "Thank you, mister." By the time Elena arrived, Miles was standing nearby, keeping a respectful distance. She saw the scrape on Maisie's knee, saw the man beside her, and her expression changed, cautious at first, then something else. Not quite gratitude, not quite ease, but something softer. "I did not mean to step in," Miles said. "This time, thank you," she replied. It was the first time she had thanked him for anything. That night, Maisie sat cross-legged on the floor with crayons and paper. She drew a man standing in the rain. Beside him was a blurry figure, undefined, like a memory too faded to finish. She held it up to her mother. "Mommy, who's he waiting for?" Elena stared at the drawing. Then she looked at her daughter and said nothing. The next morning, Miles opened his mailbox to find that very picture, folded neatly inside, tucked into an envelope with no name. He knew exactly who it was from. Later that day, they crossed paths again at the local market. Elena stood in front of the coffee shelf, hesitating between two brands, one cheap, one not. Miles stepped forward, reached for the more expensive one, and handed it to the cashier before she could react. When she noticed, her brow furrowed. "You think I need help? I think you deserve better coffee," he said, calm and sincere. She stared at him for a moment, then took the bag without a word. No thank you, no anger, just silence. But she kept it. The next day it rained. Miles watched the clouds roll in from the window of the little cafe across the street. He had brought his laptop, but could not bring himself to open it. Instead, he stared out, waiting without realizing it. A knock came at the door of his rental later that afternoon. When he opened it, Maisie stood there, clutching another drawing wrapped in plastic to protect it from the rain. Her dress was damp at the edges. She held it up to him. "This is for you." The drawing showed 3 people standing beneath a small roof, 2 tall figures, and a little girl. Rain poured all around, but none of them were wet. "I drew rain," she said softly. "But they're not getting wet, because they're close together." From behind her, Elena approached slowly, umbrella in hand. She did not say anything, but when their eyes met, her expression had changed. The wall between them was still there, but it had begun to crack. The storm the night before had rattled every window in town. Rain had come down in sheets, thunder rolled like a threat in the distance, and by morning, the world looked wrung out. Puddles lined the streets. Power lines sagged with the weight of the wind's fury. Miles had not seen Elena or Maisie all day. He took a walk past their house in the early evening, just as the sky began to break into soft blues again. That was when he noticed the latter propped against the side of their roof, and Elena standing on the porch, looking up at a steady drip from the edge of the shingles. He returned 10 minutes later with his sleeves rolled up and a toolbox in hand. She opened the door before he could knock. "I did not ask for help," she said, her voice guarded. "You have a leak," Miles replied. "I know how to use a hammer." Elena hesitated for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Maisie's at a friend's house," she said, more explanation than warning. Miles climbed onto the roof, checking for loose shingles, nails, and signs of rot. The damage was not extensive, but it needed attention. For the next hour, he worked in silence while Elena gathered towels to catch what the patchwork could not. When he finally came back inside to clean up, Elena handed him a glass of water and gestured toward the back room. "There's a towel in the closet if you want to dry off," she said. Miles nodded, headed down the hall, and opened the wrong door. It was a small room that looked more like a storage space. Boxes stacked along the wall, a folding chair, a dusty lamp. He glanced around, searching for the closet. Then his eyes caught something on the desk. A worn notebook, a medical logbook, its cover creased with use. It was open to a page dated 5 years ago. Rachel Brennan, room 217. Emergency response documentation. Handwritten notes filled the margins, vital signs, declining pulse, respiratory failure, treatment initiated by E. Brooks, no attending physician on site. His hand hovered over the page. "Do not read that," Elena's voice snapped from behind him. He turned. She stood in the doorway, her arms tight across her chest, eyes sharp but shining. I know what it is, she said, and I know what you are thinking. I just want the truth. I broke protocol. I acted without permission. That is the truth. She walked into the room slowly, the floor creaking beneath her feet. Your wife started seizing 30 minutes after surgery. Her numbers plummeted. The doctor in charge had left for a meeting. No one wanted to act without an order, but she was crashing. Elena's voice wavered. I used medication from another case. I started CPR. I shocked her heart, and after 20 minutes she opened her eyes. Just for a while. Miles stared at her. She was awake? She held my hand and whispered your name, Elena said. She smiled. I think she knew, and I think she was ready. A long silence settled between them. Miles looked down at the notebook again. You gave her back to me, even if it was only for a moment. I took a risk I was not allowed to take, Elena said. They fired me, labeled me unfit. I did not care. I would do it again. For the first time since they met, her voice cracked. I just wish she had lived. Miles stepped forward, slower than before. Not with the urgency of a man seeking answers, but with the weight of someone beginning to understand. You should not have been punished, he said quietly. You should have been honored. Elena blinked hard, then looked away. I do not want pity. This is not pity, Miles said. It is gratitude. Elena tried to speak but failed. Her lips parted, then closed again. Her arms dropped to her sides. The tears came then, uninvited and raw. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet streams down her face, as if she had spent years learning not to let them fall, and had finally forgotten how to stop them. And Miles stood there, watching the woman who had saved his wife, the woman who had carried guilt instead of recognition, and felt something shift inside his chest. It was no longer just about Rachel. It was about her. The afternoon light spilled through the kitchen window, painting the worn wooden table in soft gold. Elena poured tea into 2 chipped mugs and slid one across to Miles, who sat across from her, silent but attentive. Outside, the sound of birds and distant laughter from children filtered in through the open door. I was 24, Elena began, eyes fixed on her hands. Fresh out of nursing school. I thought I had the world figured out. Miles said nothing. He watched her, his gaze steady, patient. I was working night shifts, long hours. The hospital was my second home. That is where I met him. A resident, older, confident. He made me feel seen. She paused, fingers tightening around the mug. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought he would stay. I told him, and he looked at me like I had ruined his life. Miles's jaw clenched, but he stayed quiet. He transferred hospitals within a week. I never heard from him again. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. My parents had passed away the year before. I had no savings, no job after Rachel's case, no one to call, but I had Maisie. Miles leaned forward, his voice low. That must have been terrifying. Elena shrugged, but it was the kind of motion that said everything and nothing. It was, but she gave me a reason to keep moving. There was a long pause, the kind that did not feel awkward, only full. Maisie is lucky to have you, Miles said. Elena looked at him then. Really looked. Most people only see what I am not. Not enough money, not enough stability, not enough to trust. I see someone who stood her ground when no one else did, Miles replied. And someone who gave my wife a chance to say goodbye. That silenced her. They sat that way for a while, the weight of what had been spoken hanging in the air, not heavy, but real. When the sun began to dip, Miles stood. I should go, he said quietly. He reached for his coat but then paused. His hand rested briefly on her shoulder. Not firm, not assuming, just present. Elena looked up, startled by the touch, but did not pull away. For a second, they held each other's gaze. She nodded once. That night, Maisie curled up beside her mother in bed, playing with the edge of her blanket. "Mom?" she asked sleepily. Yes, baby? What? Do you like the sad man? Elena blinked. The what? Maisie turned her face into the pillow. You know, the man who looks sad but smiles when he sees you. Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. Her cheeks warmed. She reached over and brushed Maisie's curls back from her forehead. Go to sleep, sweetheart. Maisie mumbled, already drifting. I think he likes you too. In the quiet that followed, Elena stared at the ceiling, the ghost of a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. And for the first time in a very long while, she did not feel so alone. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a couple in the corner and the soft hum of an old refrigerator near the back wall. Rain tapped against the windows, light and steady, like it had been waiting for the perfect moment to set the tone. Miles sat at a table near the window, nursing a black coffee gone cold. Across from him, Elena stirred her tea without drinking. Her hair was damp from the mist outside, and her eyes were unreadable. They had not spoken much since yesterday, when someone from Miles's world had come to town. The man had introduced himself as a colleague, smiled too much, talked too loud, and said just enough. I heard Miles is doing great things here, the man had said, clapping him on the back. He told me about the clinic idea, naming it after Rachel. Touching stuff. Elena had overheard. She had not said anything then, but now her silence was sharp, jagged. Miles finally broke it. You have been quiet. I have been thinking. He waited. I should have known, she said, voice low. You did not come here for me. Miles frowned. What are you talking about? You came to ease your conscience, to say thank you, build a clinic, put Rachel's name on the front, and go back to your real life. That is not fair. Elena set down her spoon. No, from where I stand, it looks exactly like that. Miles leaned forward. I came here because Rachel asked me to find you, and I stayed because I wanted to. You stayed because you felt guilty. No, he snapped, sharper than he intended. I stayed because I care. Her laugh was dry, bitter. You do not know me well enough to care. That is not true. It is, and it is fine, Miles. You do not owe me anything. I never asked you for help. I never asked you to fix my roof, or buy my coffee, or make my daughter draw happy pictures again. She stood suddenly, pushing back the chair. I do not need favors from a rich man with a broken heart. Miles stood too, his temper flaring. And I do not need another woman who hides behind pride so she does not have to let anyone in. They stared at each other, the air between them thick with everything they could not say. I do not need your pity, she said, her voice trembling now. This is not pity, Miles shot back. But maybe your pride is just an excuse to stay hurt. Her eyes flashed. And maybe your kindness is just another way to avoid your own grief. That stopped him cold. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Elena turned and walked out into the rain without looking back. Miles stood there for a few seconds longer before grabbing his coat and storming out the other way. By the time Elena returned home, the house felt too quiet, the air too heavy. She stepped into the kitchen, set her purse on the counter, and leaned against the sink. Her hands gripped the edge until her knuckles turned white. Then, slowly, she crumbled. The tears came fast and hot, falling silently onto her shirt. Maisie peeked from the hallway, barefoot and holding her stuffed bunny. She had never seen her mother cry. She walked quietly to her side and wrapped small arms around her waist. Elena sank to the floor and pulled her daughter into her lap, holding her close. I'm okay, baby, she whispered into Maisie's hair, though her voice cracked on the words. Maisie did not say anything. She just held her. And for the first time in a long time, Elena let herself fall apart. The city felt colder than he remembered. The skyline stretched far beyond the glass windows of his apartment, but none of it felt like home. Miles stood in silence, coffee cold in his hands, eyes unfocused as the traffic below moved without him. It had been 3 days since Briar Hill. 3 days since the argument. 3 days since he walked away from the only thing that had made him feel something again. The knock came mid-afternoon. At the door stood his attorney, holding a worn leather folder. "I was instructed to give this to you only if you ever asked about a woman named Elena Brooks," the man said. Miles froze. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with time. On the front, in fading ink, Rachel had written, "For Miles. If he ever finds her." His chest tightened as he opened it. "My love, if this letter has found you, it means you did what I never had the courage to ask. You found Elena. There's something you never knew. The morning I woke after the seizure, you were beside me, asleep. My body was failing, but for a moment, I felt peace. That peace was a gift from her. Elena broke every rule to keep me alive just long enough to whisper that I loved you. Long enough to feel your hand in mine. She didn't just save my life. She gave me the goodbye I was afraid I would never have. If you are angry at her, please forgive her. She deserves a life, not the guilt she carries. And you deserve love again. Maybe she is the one to remind you your heart still beats. If she is, don't waste it. With all my love, Rachel." Miles pressed the letter to his chest, as though it was the last living piece of her. She had known. Somehow, she had known what Elena had done, and what he might one day feel. Guilt, confusion, pride, fear, and she had answered it all in a single page. That night, sleep never came. He lay in the dark, remembering Elena's voice, the way her shoulders tensed when she braced herself for judgment, the quiet when she said nothing at all. He missed her. He missed Maisie. And for the first time, it wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It was about them. 2 days later, Miles returned to Briar Hill. This time, he didn't come empty-handed. In the back seat was an envelope holding the deed to a small house on the edge of town, a place with a garden, a little porch, and a bedroom window that faced the hills. He had bought it weeks ago. Back then, he told himself it was charity. Now, he knew better. It wasn't a gift. It was a promise. As the sun dipped low, casting soft gold across the quiet street, Miles stepped out of his car. The envelope was tucked in one pocket, and hope in the other. The rain had come quietly that evening. Not a storm, not a downpour. Just a soft, steady fall that blurred the streetlights and turned the world into a watercolor of gray and gold. Miles stood on the porch of the small house, his coat soaked through, hair dripping, hands trembling not from the cold, but from everything he had not said. The wooden door creaked open. Maisie peeked out first, her eyes wide beneath the pink hood of her rain jacket. She blinked up at him, then turned to look behind her. "Elena," Miles said, his voice barely above a whisper. She appeared in the doorway a second later. Her blonde hair, damp and pulled back loosely, framed a face that was unreadable. Not cold, not angry, just quiet. They stood there for a long beat, rain falling between them like a curtain. Miles swallowed. "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I was wrong to walk away. Wrong to think this was just about Rachel. It's not." Elena's lips parted slightly, but she did not speak. Miles took a small step closer, rain pooling around his shoes. "I didn't come back to repay anything, or to make peace with the past. I came back because I don't want to leave this. I don't want to leave you, or her." He looked down at Maisie, who had stepped out beside her mother, holding her bunny close to her chest. "I don't know what we are," he continued. "I don't know if I'm ready, or if you are, or if this even makes sense. But I know what it feels like to come home and have it mean something. You and Maisie, you feel like home." Elena's eyes glistened, her chin trembling. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, she opened the door wider. Not with words, not with a grand gesture. Just a silent invitation. Miles stepped inside, dripping, breathless, heart wide open. She closed the door behind him. A year passed. The town of Briar Hill had changed in small, meaningful ways. The old clinic had been restored, painted in fresh white and blue, with a new sign that read, "Rachel's Hope." Inside, Elena walked the halls again, this time not as someone forgotten, but as the woman who had been brave enough to stay. She wore a white coat now, not just scrubs. Her name on the badge meant something. Miles split his time between cities, but every weekend, without fail, he returned home. To their home. To the little house with sunflowers blooming in the yard and Maisie's rain boots always drying by the door. He never pushed Elena, never asked for more than she was ready to give. But he showed up, with coffee every morning, with stories for Maisie every night, with quiet strength in the spaces where old wounds still lived. One Sunday afternoon, Elena stood at the kitchen counter, slicing apples for a pie. Her hair was shorter now, cut just above her shoulders, not because it was easier, but because she no longer needed to hide behind it. Miles walked in from the yard, shirt wrinkled, laughing as Maisie tugged at his arm. "Come see what I drew," she said, holding a sheet of paper above her head. Elena turned, wiping her hands on a towel. Maisie placed the drawing on the table. 3 stick figures stood under a red roof, holding hands. Rain fell around them, but none of them were wet. At the bottom, in crooked purple letters, she had written, "Our family, finally." Elena covered her mouth. Miles looked at her, then reached across the table to take her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. She didn't need to. Because finally, they were not just people trying to survive their pasts. They were a family learning how to live again. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, we invite you to stay with us. At Soul Stirring Stories, we believe in the quiet power of love, the healing that comes from second chances, and the beauty of lives that find each other when they need it most. If you want more stories like this, stories that move you, stories that matter, don't forget to subscribe and smash that hype button to support the channel. Your support helps us keep sharing tales that remind us all, love can grow even from the deepest loss, and sometimes, family is found in the most unexpected places. We'll see you in the next story. Take care, and keep feeling.